Hey guys, welcome back to Moto-Resto, Florida. We're going to be getting on this KZ900 now. Let's start going over this really quick, and I know you want to know the detail on it. I don't know a whole lot, but I will tell you what I do know. And the first thing we'll look at is the mileage. I believe this is the accurate mileage. Was that 5,938 and change? All right. I believe that the tachometer is the right number, 0. That's a joke, folks.
Think about that. That's just dumb.
That was stupid. Again, I'm not terribly familiar with these 900s. This is the first one I'll be working on as far as an old original one as opposed to something that's been butchered up. But the story on this is that the fellow that my customer bought it from, he got it at some point and was actually riding it, and then I can't remember if something happened or if he just decided to do a restoration on it. I think that was probably more likely. So what he ended up doing was he ended up taking it all apart. I don't know if the inside of the engine's been done. I can't honestly remember what he said when I picked it up. That was actually a while back. I've had this for a while. And I asked him if it ran. He said, oh yeah, it ran.
Ran when parked.
And put it back together or whatever he said he did. And he said, you're probably going to need to go through the carbs because they're probably dirty or something. I do have the air inlets for this in a box, but it's missing some stuff under the seat for the air inbox or inlet side of the air box. He said that it's like almost unobtainium, so I don't even know what he's talking about. We'll have to look at that because, again, I'm just not terribly familiar with it. As far as the rest of the bike goes, she's in pretty good shape. My customer does not have the original exhaust for it, but he is sourcing a, I believe he said a 4x4 for it, just like the original one it was apparently. So he's sourcing an aftermarket 4x4, which is going to be real cool. I'm really dying to put that on here. That'd be real nice. So I like that idea. And I'm sorry I got the fan on, folks, but it's 986 degrees Celsius right now.
That's bullshit. That's not true.
And it's just hot, hot, hot. So doing the best I can. He did a really nice job on it. Yeah, there was a leak here. There was dripping brake fluid. I took care of that. It was just a loose banjo. But I haven't cranked it. Haven't put any power to it. I'm not going to at this point. I'm not going to try to start it with jumper in the wires or anything because, you know, it doesn't matter. This thing needs a wiring harness anyway. I figure let's go ahead and do the wiring harness, get it done, hook all the power up, we'll get a battery for it, make sure that there's no smoke being let out. Of course, you know, this doesn't have a Lucas electrical system, so I doubt it would. And so, you know, then at that point, we'll hook as far as the ignition up goes and see how it fires. This is going to be obviously multiple videos. So I'm going to go ahead and get it up, and then we'll put you in a stand so you can watch the action once it's up. And then we'll take it from there. All right, we're fast forwarding and rewinding at the same time, if that's even possible. Fast forwarding, as you can see that I've got the tank off, side covers and so forth. And we're up in the air, getting ready to start stringing the wiring and the harness and making connections and so forth. Rewinding because I started doing all that and I shot a bunch of footage and have to discard it because some silly person in the parts department, that would be me, well, they ordered the wrong harness. And the reason why they ordered the wrong harness is because they thought this was a 73. For some reason, that silly person had stuck in their mind that this was a 73. This is actually a 76. That would be me also. So that harness just is not going to work on this. And I knew that because I did start stringing it and I had it all the way up to here. And I'm missing a plug on the harness for one of the plugs in the headlight bucket, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But then I realized that silly person's folly, and I ordered the correct harness. I was going to return the 73 harness, but it turns out that my customer is in the process of procuring a 73 that probably is going to need wiring. So he said, hang on to it because you're probably going to need it anyway. So in the end, it worked out, and we're going to put the right one on. And I'm going to go over some things about wiring. When you're doing this, especially without a previous harness to go off of, to verify or to help verify, and you know, using common sense as well and wiring diagrams, where stuff goes and how it goes. Here is the panel, and it's very similar, if not identical, to the one on the Z1R and other 1000s and so forth that are a little bit, you know, from the 70. I know the 77, the A1 has it over here, so I guess the ones onwards from the 76 900 are like this, I'm assuming. So what I've done is, over here I have a couple of different harnesses. Now the way these kits come, you can buy them in different configurations, but the full Monty essentially comes with 4 harnesses. Comes with what's called a battery harness, the main harness, the tail harness, and the instrument cluster, or you know, instrument lights, you know, that harness. When you get this, you guys kind of take a look at it, and we'll go over that again as far as matching up wires. But I'm going to tell you what I did and then what I did again. Originally I took this, which was the one that was in here. Now it's important to note that this was actually mounted this way, with the brown on the left and the blue on the right. And I've switched that around. I'll explain why here in a second. This harness is probably perfectly fine, and it looks like it's aftermarket and been replaced in the past, but it was a little chewy, so I decided to replace it. And I replaced it with this one, which is the one out of the 73, 74, 75 Z1 harness kit, which is probably the exact same thing as that one, which is the one out of the 76 and on, I guess, electrical wiring kit. But I wasn't sure, so this is going to go in with the box on the 73, so that way it's all together and I have the correct harness for that. And this will be simply just a spare. So what I've done is I've taken that battery harness from the 76 wiring kit, and I have replaced that second one in here, but I've switched it around. I switched it around because it didn't make sense as far as the wiring runs on the back go to have it with the harness the other way, because the white wire you see right there was actually over here and it wouldn't reach through the grommet. Plus on the Z1R, this is how the plugs are laid out. The brown one's on the right and the blue one is all the way on the left, and everything reaches fine. That brown is actually your tap into your main harness. So you got to understand that this setup here is really just a junction center. Each one of these individual plugs doesn't particularly go to an individual location. It joins all the circuits together from individual locations to do different functions. So really the way to do this on this particular setup, I believe, is this way. Not only because it matches the Z1R, which is a 78, pretty close to the 76, but for, again, reasons that I'll show you here in a second. This is a harness that the previous owner put on. This red wire with the white tapped off of it is your main power out, and you can see it bifurcates into 2. And I'll show you what you got to do with that as well. All right, now I'm going to blow some of this dust and wipe some of this crap off out of this thing, because it's been sitting, you know, for how long, who knows. And then we'll go ahead and put the panel in, the electrical panel in. I'm going to bring out the proper harness. We'll go over some wiring stuff. Actually, we might go over some wiring stuff before that, but anyway, you'll see what I mean here in a second. Here's the main, this is the main harness. This is all the harnesses. This is the package. Has all the harnesses in it. Now, normally what I do is hang these up, the main harness, to stretch them out, but I haven't had time to do it because I just got this in. For some reason, the mail came at like, o'clock last night. And let's see. Well, I was wrong on this one. I thought that this kit came with the other harnesses for the front and the back. That's typically how they come, but you can order them that way. I must have just ordered the main harness. But that's okay, because we don't need it anyway. But if you need it, you just have to make sure that you do that wherever you order them from. Make sure you get all the wiring. The reason it's okay is we have a tail harness that looks brand new that the previous owner must have put in. And likewise, we have a harness going up to the instruments that looks brand new as well. In a way it works out, in a way I kind of screwed up, but I mean, when does that ever happen?
It's been happening a lot lately.
Right now what we have is we have a situation that is going to be fine with this harness because it's the proper harness for this bike, all right? But normally if you order them with all the harnesses, the battery harness, this came with the battery harness because I did put this in here. So it came with the main and the battery harness, but not the tail and not the head, okay? So now that we're all completely confused, These really aren't too terribly hard if you really think about it. All right, so this harness on this main harness plug is brown, which goes to the brown, and that brown is going into your main, is feeding other things from your main, or to the main harness. Shit.
That's bullshit.
But the first thing I like to do on these things is to verify that we've got the right harness and the right colors going to the right places. So before I mount this, what we can do is we can turn this over and we can look at some of the wire colors on this plug oriented in the orientation that this goes in. So it's only going to go one way because it's got like a little pin on the side of it there where it lines up to, and so it'll only go one way, except for that hair that's in there. So it slides in like this. So if we take a look at this harness on the front, and we see that on the upper left there's a black with a yellow, that's ground. We can look in here and see that there is a matching black with a yellow. Just below it there is a blue with a red, and we have a matching blue with a red on the back side as well, and then a green with a red, and so forth. On the other side we have a big brown. There's a big brown there. It's on the top upper left, which on this one it is also on the top upper left. And then you have a white, and then of course on the very bottom a black. We know that's correct. You can do this on any of the harnesses. So if you wanted to take a look at it on the stuff that's on the bike to make sure that it's right, because again, we're going to be plugging components in. In other words, we have some plugs there already. This one goes to the voltage regulator, this green one, which is underneath the battery box. This one comes up from the stator, this blue plug, which has also two other wires on it, one of which being the blue one up here. You can kind of see it up in there. Which is your oil pressure light, and the other one is your neutral light. All right, so I'm sorry, this one here, neutral light. So in this case, it's actually a green with a red and blue. Looks like no tracer on the blue. And sometimes these wires are faded. Usually these stator wires are yellow, but these just may be all faded out or something different color they used. This appears to be original, so we'll have to inspect this down the line and make sure it's all good down in there in a future time. So there's a connection between all of these that are appropriate for that particular function. So that's why this junction is so important, and the plugs are important to have right. Now the question may arise whether or not it's necessary to do this at all in the first place as far as matching up wires, because you know you're buying a harness for a specific application. I believe it is, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple reasons. Number one, you can make a mistake. I tend to make a lot of mistakes lately, or as I get older. You want to make sure that you have the right harness. The only way to do that is to match up wires. The next point is on those wire colors. On these aftermarket harnesses, some of these wires don't line up as far as colors go, but there's a little plastic sheath on the wire toward the end of the plug where you're plugging it in that says what the wire is meant to be as far as the color goes. So for example, it might be a white wire, and there'll be a little plastic sheath that says white with a red, or you know, blue with a yellow. And so I don't know why they do it that way, but sometimes you see that. So it's really good to look at these things for those reasons alone right there to make sure that they all line up properly. The other thing is, you know, I would like to show you with a little bit more clarity on this stuff, but it's not the easiest thing to film without somebody following you around, so you can kind of zoom up on stuff that you're doing. So I'm doing the best I can, and I hope that wasn't too terribly confusing for you. All right, that's mounted in. Now the first thing you do on these harnesses, you start where you know where the wires either originate, well usually originates the best. Where they terminate is going to be a problem because then you may not have the stretch right along the frame. It looks like it does have that 4-pin for that fuse block, so apparently I am incorrect. I mean, when does that ever happen? This guy really looks like it goes in here. Let's look at the wire colors. Blue with a red, blue with a red, brown with a white, blue with a white, and blue. So that is correct. So it does get those individual fuses there. And we can, you know, unplug and reroute these as we need. We're just giving a rough routing right now. Wire routing is always a problem on these when you don't have another harness to go off of, which is of course our problem. I have no idea, or I had no idea which side of the frame this goes on or anything. So there's a couple sources you can look this up. You can try to find it on a forum or something. Maybe somebody's got a couple of photos you know, posted, which I couldn't find. In the parts fish for this bike, in the wiring section of the fish, it does give a drawing, but it's very vague and it's just not very clear. So, but based on that and based on a couple other things that I looked up, it appears that the way this wiring harness goes is it originates over on the right side here, which is why, again, I was thinking that this needed to be flipped because that brown was originally over here, the way the previous owner had this battery harness put in. I think that's right because it starts over here and it runs over and it goes underneath here and comes up on the right side of the frame. And then comes up the right side of the frame, crosses over to the left side of the frame. There's a connector on the harness that matches up this 3-pin to the ballast resistor.
That's not true.
I called this thing a ballast resistor. That's not correct. This is the brake light malfunction switch. On the drawing, it's called the brake light failure indicator switch, denoted by a yellow, black, and a green with a white. Yellow, black, green with a white. I don't know why I was calling it a ballast resistor. This isn't a freaking Dodge Dart. So I'm guessing that's what turns on that indicator or that brake stop lamp indicator right there is when there's a malfunction in a bulb or something. This switch energizes that circuit and turns that light on is what I'm guessing. For wire restraint mock-up only at this point, we're going to be using regular zip ties, but I'm not going to leave zip ties in here. I'm going to be using at least something that I can find that looks more original. They're really actually very difficult to find. I have found a source on eBay that supposedly for old Yamahas, and they look like the kind that with they're like little zipper thing with the little tang that holds it in, kind of like when you tuck your belt into that little belt loop thing on your belt, you know, so your pants don't fall down when you're a fat guy like me. I am thinking that that's the way that that's going to go. And this one back here, you can tell right now because it's got two little bayonet styles on this that it goes to a flasher can. Now there are two flasher cans mounted in here, but since this is tied into here like this, all right, since it's way over here, and that goes up to this plug here for the rear tail lights, we know that most likely these two bayonets go to this flasher right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this guy up in here and see how it lays. Right up here for the rear tails and tail sections, and then you have your bayonets guys here that will go directly to this flasher can. So we know where those go. I know where these go too, so I'm not going to worry about them. That's off the little fuse block, and I know where that goes, and I know where these go. So I'm not too worried about that either. So a lot of this stuff just falls into place as you do it. We can probably get that right up in there, and these guys will go up in here. I have a green that's hooked up to there, like that. There's a black wire. Oh, you know what? That ground actually may go there. I bet you this is the voltage regulator ground right here. That makes more sense. This is probably where it goes here because the voltage regulator is most definitely gonna need a ground. And there's that little 4-pin that I was talking about before, which would most likely be this guy right here, which we can kind of stick in there too for now. Give it a place to go. So now we'll go ahead and just move over to the other side. Over on the right side, I've got the wire that comes off that part of the harness and shoots over to the right, tied in with a restraint. Probably not the exact right one, but I'll figure that out later. At least it holds it in place. I think that's what that hole is for. And thread. So I have the brake wires hooked up to the harness. And over here is actually for the emergency flasher, okay, for the hazards. Your hazard switch is up there. I'll show you these connections here in a second. But you notice there's only one bayonet or spade type connector on here, whatever you want to call it. And that's because the hazard circuit requires some diodes, but these are the other two wires for it. And I verified that on the wiring diagram, which is conveniently right here. Not like I planned that or anything. And if you look at the hazard, let's see, where is it? The hazard circuit. Right there it says hazard relay. Now you see there's an orange that goes straight into the, they call it a relay, it's a flasher can. And then you have a red and a brown, I believe. I think that's a brown. And over here, you have your orange. Got the fan on, so it's wanting to blow around. You got your orange, the one that goes straight in the can, and then your red and your brown. So these are definitely the correct wires. And how this works is you have it's hot as hell, otherwise I'd turn that fan off. You have diodes to isolate the circuit. You're actually supposed to have one on the regular turn signal relay too, which I'll probably put one in. I have some 3 amperes in stock. I'm going to use 3 of those. Why they did it this way isn't important. Just it's important to understand, the diode, as far as the theory goes, it's to isolate those 2 circuits because they're connected. What connects them is the flashers themselves, or the signals. So when you turn the hazard on, I'm not sure if it's just the rears flash or all 4 of them. I don't know, probably all 4. I could trace the circuit through, but I'm not going to do that unless I have a problem. So in this particular case, we're going to take and go directly to the flasher can, or the flasher relay, hazard relay in this case, all right, with an orange. And then we'll tie a diode in on the red rather. And then between the diode and the flasher, we'll tie the other diode in the direction shown to the brown. So we'll just make a couple little diode pack dealios with some heat shrink, and put one on this circuit too, since it calls for one on the hazard, on the signal rather. And this is your signal relay here, and this is your hazard. And we can tell that again because the way this thing goes across. Because remember, I said originally we were going to bring this whole harness across and come up the right side of the frame and cross over, and that didn't work out. I'll show you why here in a sec. But this does cross over, so we have this in the appropriate place. So that's what I meant when I said earlier, sometimes these wires just kind of fall into place. So this has to be over on this side. These guys have to be over here because the hazard relay flasher mounts right in here. We maybe actually try it out here. I don't see a problem with this flasher at all. This is like brand new. Well, anyway, here's what happened when I tried to do this. When I brought the harness over, so it was further over the way the minimal amount of drawings I have on this, show it more to the right side and crossing over. It doesn't work that way. When you put it over that far, this stuff over on this other side, which I think I referred to that earlier in the video as a ballast resistor and corrected myself. That's the brake failure indicator, switch, whatever. That won't reach. The wires here, the wires from the coils here have to reach not only the wire from the ignition, I guess there's points back there, I haven't looked yet, but it also has to reach the power on the harness. Yeah, and so this yellow with a red here is your main power for the coil. So one of the coil wires goes in there and the other one goes in here. Essentially, I'll tell you which one it is. I think it's the green and the black. Yeah, the 2 yellows go into the power. I think these are just an aftermarket coil. Yeah, they don't look right. These are aftermarket coils. So the yellows are going to go into the power here, and then the green and the black go to the appropriate one. See, green and black on the ignition coming up from down here. So this all reaches when this is over on the left side. So it comes up the left side, goes into the center a little bit, just because it's pretty long, said the wife. And then over here on the right side, continuing, we have the other bunches of connectors on another part of the harness that splits over to the other side. So this is the main side over here, but you have essentially 2 forks in the road, if you want to call them that. The one that goes over to the brake and the hazard, and then you got this bigger one up here. So everything on the right side here goes to this side. It's actually pretty easy, and there's plenty of room in here for this to fit once I clean it all up. Right now I just have it touched together just for mock-up and so forth. And this is the hazard switch, and I verified that because of the wire colors here. But I didn't even know what this was originally. I'll be honest with you. When I first looked at this bike, I thought it was some sort of a choke. I'm like, why would they do that? There's something on the carbs. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, so this is your hazard switch. And that is factory style, at least. I don't know if the switch is factory, but it's the way the wiring diagram and the parts fiches show it. Down here, also on the right side, is your horn. The 2, bayonet or whatever kind of connectors you want to call them. And so I don't have a horn. I can't hook that up. Unfortunately, the bike isn't very horny right now. Maybe that'll come. So that takes care of the right side. Going to go back over the other side real quick. I want to show you those connectors for the main power and so forth. Yeah, for the most part, this side's done, except for a little bit more neatening up and then tying things up with the appropriate ties once I get them. I still haven't figured out which ones to use. I don't want to just use wire ties, zip ties. So everything's hooked up. We even have the 4-pin over here, the 4-wire, 4-terminal for the fuse block or fuse box. And let me show you how the main power works on this, if it's confusing at all to you, because you have a couple of different white wires, and then white with a red, another white wire here. It's actually pretty simple. So start your power source. Power source comes off the big red one, and that goes right off the battery, and it's on the hot side of the solenoid for the starter itself, okay? That comes over from this white wire into 2, so 1 into 2. And then you have a red with a white and a regular white. It looks tan, but it's white, it's just faded. And this one goes directly up into the rectum fryer. And you have a ground from the rectum fryer that comes down here. And I don't know exactly where that terminal is supposed to go. Normally there's more dedicated of a frame ground on these, like one of these up here, and that won't reach, so I don't really know. So I know this is directly connected to the engine, because the engine connects to this. But I'm not 100% happy with it, but that's where we put it for now. So anyway, we come back over here. You have the main power comes in to this red with a white, okay? The red with a white goes into the 20 amp fuse. I think it's 20 amp, the main fuse in the fuse block. Comes back out to this white right here. Now this white attaches to the white that I was talking about. The reason why I flipped the main battery harness here is to put that white closer to the grommet so it actually reaches out here. That's the white that I'm talking about. So this is the fed side from the battery plus, or B plus, 12 volt DC, into the harness here, because that goes into the distribution here. So this is how this gets all its power. And then the individual circuits are fused, there's only 2 of them, 2 others, 2 or 3. I think there's 3 fuses in here total, so it's only 2 others in this battery box via that 4-pin right there. Just goes in and back out. And everything else is hooked up the way it's supposed to be hooked up. So I haven't tested the stator wires or the stator function. We'll do that. We'll do all that once the engine's running, to see if it's charging. That's how that works as far as this side. So this was actually a fairly easy setup over here, because number one, I've done this a couple of times, and number 2, it's just not hard over here because everything lines up and the appropriate plugs exist, or the connectors, right? Like for example, here's another brown with an orange, and you'd say, well, wait a minute, there's an orange over here and a brown. Well, that's because they're on the same circuit for the signals, or in this case, this is the turn signal. Well, that's why you need isolation with diodes, because it's really the same wires, just doing different functions, okay, to the same destination, which is the turn signals. So otherwise you'd be energizing each other's circuit whenever you turn one or the other on. So that's what the diodes are going to be for, right? So this is a good flasher can, because I'll show you how this stuff works here in a second. It's not much of a display because it just flashes, but I'll power it up to a battery jumper pack and you can see everything does work. And yeah, so like I said, this side, it really looks complicated, but it's not. And as we move our way up here, you see that I got the cable routed where it's going to live basically, once I strap it in place. And the nice thing about this one, Ed, don't mind this, these are for the brake lights. Remember I talked about the pressure switch earlier? Well, I don't like the straight connectors, and I don't have any 90-degree number 8 stud.
Tell me about it, stud.
Connectors, so I've ordered some. So I'm going to take those black wires that come on the number 8 stud wires, and I'm going to shove them up into the bucket with these. That way you don't see any color wires at all. It'll be both black coming out. Make the connections up in here. I just got them on order. I don't even have a shipping notice for them or anything yet. So I just ordered them yesterday. So disregard that. We have our plugs from, the instruments, the ignition switch, and this side switch cell, if you will, nacelle, that goes down and connects to everything that isn't already previously connected in. And I'm going to do it inside the headlight bucket because there's plenty of room. And this main harness is very long for that.
That's what she said.
Said the wife. And so there's no problem. It reaches inside there, does a classic reach around, no problem, as well as everything underneath here I've already shown you. So anyway, here's the unusual part. The unusual part is we have a 6-pin connector, and that comes off of the ignition switch. This is actually the ignition switch connector, this female. And on the wiring harness that came from Z1 parts, this is a 4-pin connector. All right, so again, this is the ignition side. Comes right off the ignition. Dang it. Ugh. This comes off the ignition switch. Now this is most definitely not an OEM switch. I don't think it is, at least. If it's an OEM switch, it's a brandy new one, but I believe it's aftermarket. It just looks aftermarket. If you look at the wiring colors on this, you've got a white and a brown. On this one, you got a white with a brown. Let me turn it this way so it's kind of easier to see. So you have a white and a brown, and you have a white with a brown, and then below that you have a red with a blue, and on this one you got the red with a blue. It's actually this way. The white with a brown, red with a blue. That's it on the main harness. And then there's 2 other wires. There's a yellow, yellow with a white and a green with a red. I can't find those 2 wires anywhere on any wiring diagram for any 900 or 1000. I have no idea what the heck they're for or why this is a 6-pin connector. Well, I sort of have an idea. Remember, this is the harness, so it's not that. This is the harness from the ignition switch that was already on here. Now the beauty of this is, and I'm not going to leave it this way, is if you line the 2 orientation profile of the switch, of the plug together, and you plug them in, you can go to those exact wires. White to white, red to red, and so forth. So they work. But I'm not going to leave it this way. I'll tell you what I'm doing with it here in a minute. So I don't quite understand this. So I probably spent an hour on this trying to figure this out, because stuff like this bugs me. It really bugs me when the connectors don't line up. This 9-pin up here that comes off the harness went right into the 9-pin that comes off of all the instruments and so forth up here, or the lights and camera and action up in here. No problem, okay? All the colors lined up like I showed you earlier, no problem. Yes, this is aftermarket. I suspected it was, and I just found it online in a couple of different listings. Z1 Enterprises has these, in fact. They're an aftermarket ignition switch. They are designed to be used either with 4 or 6-pin connectors. I still don't like the fact that it's not plugged in solidly, so I'm going to take the appropriate corrective action, in my opinion. But they're manufactured apparently by MGO, or whoever MGO has them manufactured for it. MGO is selling them. So there may be other sellers or other manufacturers, but that's the one I found. The wire colors match up. So yeah, this is definitely an aftermarket ignition switch. This guy down here is actually for, even though it's an orange with a brown, it's on the starter, where's my head? It is on the flasher circuit, because you can tell those wires, orange and brown, but it's not for any light. It's actually for a beeper. Unless unless my customer wants a beeper put in, we're not doing anything with this, because that's just annoying as hell, all right? And the rest of these, I know what the function is for them. They do a variety of different things. The rest of it is self-explanatory. A couple of these are for the headlight. These bullet connectors for the headlight circuit go into a pigtail, and that pigtail goes into a 3-pin connector, typical to like the H4 style bulbs, and didn't come with one. So I ordered one from Z1 Enterprises and just got an email from an order. I have some other stuff on it too, that their inventory was screwed up and they actually don't have that, so they refunded it and they shipped my order. So I'm going to steal a 3-pin. It's out there in the shed from the old Z1R harness, and we're just going to make one temporarily. It's not going to look all that pretty. You're not going to see it anyway, but eventually I want to replace it with something new. The solution to this is, I'm going to take this off of the harness that came in, the aftermarket main harness, and I'm going to change this over to a 6-pin connector. We are simply going to leave these 4 pins in the 6-pin connector, and we're not going to pin out the other 2 wires that we don't know what they go for. I haven't tested them yet. I probably should do that, but I don't see them on the wiring diagram. This would be right there, the yellow with a white and that green with a red. I don't know. I guess I should test them, but we're just not going to use them. So they'll be going into null spots on the plug itself. I don't have any of these particular ones, which is unusual because usually I have a lot of plugs, but I've gone through them. So I ordered a couple of them. Z1 Enterprises luckily had these. That's what I'm going to do. We'll pin this out to 6, leave those 2 null, put it together, because it would probably work, but I don't like the idea of having a 4-pin and a 6-pin. Apparently you don't have to do that with the plug, because I got to go out to the truck and get the battery here. So talking to you while I'm walking. The 4-pin plug is supposed to be able to be used with the 6-pin connector, the more I read about it. So you just plug it in. That's why the 4 important wires line up, and the features of that plug that orient it allow that to happen. So that's what I'm reading. At least I'm reading more on it that you know, it's apparently you can just plug it right in and leave it, but I really don't like the way that plug is kind of rocking in there. So this is the way I'm going to solve it or take care of it, but you can just leave it if you're going to use a plug like that and you have the same situation. I'm not saying you have to do it that way. One bateria now in stock, and of course Mama's Amazon delivery. So what I'll do right now is I'll take this and I'm going to do a couple of hookups, more hookups, because I had it hooked up and tested it and then I disconnected some stuff. So I'm going to hook actually everything. I'm going to make those diode gizmos for the signals. Maybe we can just clean terminals on another flasher can and see if we can get those working as well. And I'll show you the signals and we'll just show you the display light up, and I guess that's about it. Can't run it. We're not running it yet, so don't get all fired up about that. It ain't happening. Alrighty, got a diode in line on the orange wire for the regular flashers. I put the old flasher cam back in, and well, not the old one, but the one that was kind of crusty. I cleaned off the terminals and then put the good one over there. It does work, I'll show you, but it doesn't work the other way, which is unusual because they're really 2 flasher cams. So this one is all crusty, is probably marginal internally. Probably can't handle the load.
That's what she said.
Of all 4 lights, because it tries to go and then it bails. So when we get a new flasher cam, we'll just switch it out with this one. I'm sure it'll be fine, but this all works. So I'll show you the other side. Here's a little diode set up for the hazards. I think that's what this screw hole is for, is a cable restraint for all this, because they would know, the engineers would know that this would be kind of an unstable structure here, having a little diode pack off of it. So I'll come up with a wire restraint for that, an appropriate one, or as close as I can get to an appropriate one. And maybe I can find what the part number is for that. But anyway, we'll get all this tucked in nice, because this was on the inside here. I don't think it fits there because that silencer won't clear. So I moved it over here. I'm pretty sure it goes over here. So anyway, just turn the power on. And right signal. We've got right turns. Front and rear. And of course left turns. Front and rear. And with the ignition still on, we hit the, it's a hard switch to hit, and then we have hazards.
That was easy.
Of course, this is from the back. Yeah, so they all work. Everything works. I knew it would. I mean, the wires are there. But we'll get a better flasher can over there and then do this up. And of course, you got the 4, or the both sides indicators flashing. So that's good. So yeah, that all works. I like it. I like it when stuff works. That'll about do it on this one for the electrical on the 900. The next video, as I said before, will be firing it up. We'll do the ignition timing and make sure that's right. I'll have the carbs on already, and then be ready to go with an auxiliary fuel supply. Yeah, I know I've gotten comments in other videos on this topic about, you know, oh, I hate electrical and it's difficult and so forth. I actually find it easy.
That was easy.
In fact, I think I can go out on a limb and say I'd rather do electrical diagnostics on something like this than anything else. I'd rather do it than tearing a motor apart any day, and twice on Tuesday. I think I enjoy the challenge of it. You know, figuring out when you have a circuit that's not behaving nicely. And all you really need is a wiring diagram, whether you're putting a brand new harness in like I did in this video, or you're looking at an existing situation and trying to diagnose a problem. Wiring diagram is key. So if you have the proper wiring diagram, you can fix just about anything. Wiring diagram and a digital multimeter. That's really all you need. Then you can trace circuits, figure out where your problem is, and in some cases, on a motorcycle in particular, it means just replace the whole harness. But in some other cases, it's just a simple fix, you know, bad connections or something. So like I said, I like doing it, but you know, I think the only thing that you absolutely have to be able to do is see colors. You know, color blindness would be a difficult thing with color-coded wiring diagram. And that leads to an interesting quick side story that, you know, my dad was colorblind to certain colors, and he couldn't, you know, he couldn't really see all the colors on resistors and things like that. And he used to like to build old projects right over there on Dad's old bench. So my brother, being older than me, when he was younger, he would read the circuit colors, I guess, and also the colors on resistors to get the resistor values from my dad when he went to install them in places on a circuit board. And that's what he says led him to his interest in electrical engineering. I don't get into that heavily, the engineering side, I mean, because I'm more into the practical, not the theoretical. So in other words, they design it and we make it work. A lot of times they don't think about how it works when they design it, in my opinion, but we make it work, right? So speaking of making it work, if you want to see the rest of this thing work, you know what you need to do. You need to stick around, subscribe, ring the bell, share, and like. Doesn't cost you a cent, I promise, and it helps me out immensely. That way you get notified when I put more crap like this up. So as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on that next video.